The evening had grown quiet in a way that only long days can create. The kind of quiet that settles slowly, like dust, after a long road has been walked. A few people sat together in a dim room, speaking in low voices, exchanging thoughts that seemed important to them. Words moved easily among them. Some spoke loudly. Some nodded in agreement. Some simply listened, waiting for the right moment to add their own opinion. And near the edge of that gathering, there was a man who had said nothing. His clothes were simple, worn in places where time had quietly passed over them again and again. His hands rested calmly in his lap, as if they had learned long ago that patience is often stronger than movement. Most people in the room had barely noticed him, not because he had hidden himself. No. He was simply not the kind of person who demanded attention. And in places where voices compete to be heard, the quiet ones often become invisible. For a while, he simply listened. He watched the rhythm of the conversation rise and fall. One person spoke with confidence. Another interrupted gently, offering a different thought. Small laughter drifted through the room now and then, light and casual. The man's eyes moved slowly from face to face. He was not judging them. He was not searching for an opportunity to prove anything. He was only observing, the way someone watches the movement of water in a river. Have you ever noticed how people speak when they believe everyone around them agrees? Their words grow stronger. Their voices grow certain. And slowly, the room begins to feel full, not just of sound, but of pride. After some time, someone finally turned toward the quiet man. It happened almost by accident. Perhaps they noticed how long he had remained silent, or perhaps the conversation had simply begun to circle the same thoughts again and again. "Why are you so quiet?" one of them asked, half curious, half amused. Several faces turned toward him now. For the first time, the room truly saw him. The man lifted his eyes, slowly. There was no rush in his movement, no discomfort in his posture, just a calm presence that seemed almost out of place among the restless voices. For a moment, he said nothing. The silence stretched gently across the room. Then he spoke. His voice was soft, not weak, but unhurried. The kind of voice that does not fight to be heard because it trusts that truth does not need to shout. "I was only listening," he said quietly. A few people smiled politely. One man leaned back slightly, already expecting nothing interesting to follow. Another glanced at the others, the corners of his mouth lifting in quiet amusement. It was a small thing, barely noticeable, but the air in the room had changed. The poor man continued. "There is something I learned a long time ago," he said. "Something simple." Again, his words came slowly, like someone placing stones carefully along a path. But before he could finish, a soft chuckle slipped from one side of the room, then another. It was not cruel laughter, not loud enough to be called disrespectful. Just the kind that says we already know where this is going. After all, what wisdom could come from someone like him? The smiles grew a little wider. A few eyes drifted away, already losing interest. The man noticed. Of course he noticed. Quiet people often see the things others think are hidden. But he did not rush his words. He did not defend his place in the room. He did not try to raise his voice above the soft laughter that had begun to ripple gently through the air. Instead, he simply paused. And in that pause, something interesting happened. The room grew just a little more restless because silence, especially calm silence, has a strange power. It makes people aware of themselves. But still, they waited, not with patience, with curiosity mixed with quiet doubt. And perhaps, without realizing it, they were about to hear something they were not prepared to understand. The soft laughter faded, but its feeling still lingered in the air. Not everyone laughed openly. Some only smiled to themselves. Some lowered their eyes as if the moment did not concern them. Yet the message was clear enough. The room had already decided how much value the quiet man's words could carry, and strangely, he did not seem troubled by it. He sat exactly as before, his hands resting gently in his lap. His face held no sign of irritation, no effort to prove himself. It was as if the laughter had simply passed through the room like a small breeze. Noticed, but not chased. For a moment, no one spoke. The silence that followed felt different now. Earlier, it had been the silence of waiting. Now, it carried something else, a quiet discomfort that no one wished to name. The man looked around the room again, slowly. His eyes were calm, not sharp, not wounded, just calm. He began again, in the same quiet voice. There is a small thing I learned many years ago, but before the thought could fully form, someone leaned forward with a playful smile. What could a poor man possibly teach us? They said lightly. The words were spoken as a joke. The tone carried laughter inside it, and a few others allowed themselves another quiet chuckle. It was not loud, not harsh. Yet sometimes the softest dismissals carry the heaviest weight. The man heard the words clearly. The man heard the words clearly. Of course he did. But something about him remained unmoved. He did not hurry to answer the question. He did not defend the worth of his life or the lessons he had gathered along his road. Many people would have. Pride often rises quickly when dignity feels threatened, but his pride was not that kind. Instead, he allowed the words to settle just as he had allowed the laughter to settle before. Again, the room waited. Have you ever noticed how people grow uneasy when someone refuses to react the way they expect? When they throw a small stone into the water and no ripple returns. The quiet man lifted his eyes toward the one who had spoken. There was no challenge in his gaze. Only a quiet understanding, the kind that comes from having seen many moments like this before. For a brief second, it almost seemed as if he might answer the remark. The room leaned into that possibility. A few faces carried the faint excitement of conflict. Words against words. Pride against pride. It would have made the evening more entertaining. But the answer never came. Instead, the man simply fell silent again. Not the silence of defeat, not the silence of confusion. A deeper silence, one that did not need to rush toward explanation. His calm presence sat gently in the middle of the room, like a still stone resting at the bottom of clear water. And something about that stillness slowly began to shift the feeling in the air. The smiles grew smaller. The laughter did not return. Because when someone refuses to wrestle with disrespect, it leaves the other person standing alone with their own words. No one likes that feeling for very long. The man's eyes lowered for a moment, as if he were simply returning to the quiet place inside himself, as if the room, the voices, the small judgments were all passing clouds in a much larger sky. Perhaps he had seen enough of life to know something simple. Not every voice deserves an answer. Not every misunderstanding needs to be corrected. And sometimes, the moment people expect you to fight for your worth is the very moment when silence reveals it more clearly. The room slowly began to feel the weight of that silence. No one said it aloud, but something unspoken was beginning to form quietly inside their thoughts. Time passed slowly in the room. The soft flicker of the light seemed to stretch the moments, as if even the shadows were holding their breath. The conversation that had filled the space before now felt distant, almost like a memory of a different day. Words had lost their urgency. The laughter, once gentle and teasing, had faded entirely. And yet, the people in the room had not left. They had not walked away. Something was holding them there, though none could say what. The quiet man remained exactly where he had been. His posture had not changed. His hands rested lightly on his knees, his eyes calm but alert, taking in every detail. Not every detail of the room, but every detail of what it meant to be there, to be present, without needing to perform, to be still while others demanded noise. Have you ever noticed how presence alone can speak louder than any words? He began to speak again, though very softly, almost as if reminding himself of something he already knew. Sometimes, he said, the world expects you to respond, to raise your voice, to defend what you carry inside. His words were quiet, but in the silence that had grown around them, they were heard clearly. And yet, what if the A? Never is not in speaking louder, but in staying still. A few faces turned slightly, catching the weight of the idea, though no one interrupted. Not yet. The room had begun to feel the difference between sound and meaning, between the rush of words and the calm of understanding. It is strange how easily we forget that the loudest voices are not always the strongest. Sometimes strength is quiet, almost invisible, until it is the only thing left to be noticed. The quiet man paused. His gaze moved gently across the faces of those who had once laughed. Some now looked uneasy, though they did not know why. Some shifted slightly in their seats, as if the air itself had become heavier. It was not anger or shame that moved them, but recognition. Recognition that someone could remain unmoved, even when the world expected reaction. He continued slowly, letting each word rest in the space before the next. They may not see your value at first. They may even mock it. But if you chase their approval, if you fight to prove yourself, you give away the calm that no one else can take from you. And that calm is more powerful than any argument. A soft silence followed, deeper than before, The kind of silence that is not empty, but full of thought. You can feel it when it happens, a pause where hearts begin to reckon quietly with what has been observed. The room held it carefully, almost tenderly, as if afraid to disturb it. The quiet man did not look for their understanding. He did not demand it. He simply let the quiet grow. And in letting it grow, he revealed something unexpected. That stillness itself has a language. That restraint, when held with dignity, can teach more than 1,000 words. Have you ever been in the presence of someone who does not fight back? Someone who allows the world's sharp edges to pass without taking them inside? There is a lesson there, not in confrontation, not in anger, but in the simple act of remaining whole, remaining calm, remaining silent when silence itself is stronger than any reply. Slowly, the room began to shift, the soft tension in the air, the quiet doubt that had lingered, started to dissolve. The laughter that had tried to fill the space was gone entirely. There was no mockery now, only the faint stirrings of thought. Each person began to sense the weight of restraint, the quiet dignity that the man had carried from the moment he entered the room. He said no more after that. He did not need to. Sometimes the deepest lessons are not spoken aloud. They are understood in the way a room grows still, in the way faces soften, in the way the heart realizes the difference between a reaction born of pride and a silence born of strength. And as the evening deepened, the quiet man simply existed in that space, his presence alone leaving an impression that would linger long after the night had passed. The room had not changed outwardly. The people were still there, still breathing, still moving slowly. But inside, something had shifted. Something had settled quietly, like seeds waiting to grow in the right time, teaching them that strength does not always announce itself, and wisdom is often best carried in silence. The evening had grown even quieter now. The soft shadows moved slowly across the walls, as if the room itself had begun to breathe with the calm the man carried. No one spoke for several long moments. There was no need. The air had shifted in a way that could not be explained. Yet everyone in the room felt it. A stillness had settled over them, not imposed, not demanded, but present, like the gentle weight of a familiar song, remembered long after it has ended. The quiet man sat as he always had, hands resting lightly in his lap, eyes observing without seeking or judging. He did not look for acknowledgement. He did not need it. His calm was complete. And it was in that calm that something remarkable began to unfold. The room, once full of chatter, soft laughter, and casual dismissals, had begun to listen not to the words themselves, but to the presence behind them. Have you ever noticed how a single person, by simply remaining unmoved, can change the energy around them? How someone who does not argue, who does not seek to be heard, can hold more power than the loudest voice in the room. That is the kind of strength that the man carried, quiet but undeniable. He did not speak again immediately. He allowed the silence to stretch, letting the weight of his stillness settle fully. And in that silence, those who had once laughed began to feel a small unease, not fear, not guilt, something quieter than that, a recognition that their expectations, their judgments, their small need to provoke a reaction were no longer meeting him. For a long moment, the room existed in that shared pause. Eyes drifted, faces softened, and even the softest of breaths seemed louder than before. Each person began to sense something subtle, yet profound, that the world does not always require us to fight to be seen, that dignity, true dignity, does not need applause. That power, real power, often comes in the gentle refusal to react. The man's voice finally returned as soft as it had always been. They expect reactions, he said quietly, because reactions give them control. They expect anger or defense because it confirms the world as they believe it should be. But when you do not give them what they expect, when you remain unmoved, something changes. The words were simple, almost fragile. Yet in the quiet that followed, their weight could be felt. The room was no longer the same. The laughter that had filled it was gone, replaced by a slow awareness. Not everyone understood immediately. Not everyone would ever fully grasp it. But the seed had been planted, and seeds grow in silence. He did not push them to understand. He did not linger over their faces. He only remained calm, breathing slowly, letting each moment carry the lesson on its own. Sometimes, he thought, the world's lesson is learned, not in argument, not in shouting, not in being heard, but in showing that there is a space where nothing can disturb you, a space where respect for oneself does not require the approval of others. A few of those who had once leaned forward, eager to hear a response, now leaned back. The curiosity that had driven them had quieted. They felt something heavier than any argument, something gentler yet stronger than words, and in that quiet, a strange respect began to take root, not for the man's words, not even for his wisdom, but for the calm that held him like a steady flame in a windless room. It is rare, he thought, to find moments like this. Moments where silence itself becomes a teacher. Moments where the world expects noise and reaction, and instead it receives only patience, only stillness, only the quiet easer of someone who knows their own worth. Have you ever felt that? The quiet acknowledgement that the deepest strength does not shout, that it waits, it watches, it endures, and in enduring, it teaches. The room remained still long after the man had spoken. No one hurried to break the calm. No one rushed to fill the space with chatter. There was an unspoken understanding now that sometimes it is enough to simply be, to simply hold oneself with quiet respect, to simply watch without anger, without need, without expectation. And as the night stretched on, the man's presence remained steady, unshaken by the thoughts and judgments that had once filled the room. The lesson had passed into the quiet hearts of those who had observed him, that true power is often silent, that true respect begins within, and that the most lasting influence is found not in the noise we make, but in the stillness we carry when the world hopes for a reaction. The room, once restless and full, now seemed lighter, calmer, as if it had absorbed something deeper than words could capture. And the man simply sat, a quiet witness to his own truth, letting the silence speak in ways that no one could ever forget.